Gonna show you what I know, break it free from the mainstream, the studio machine. I want it my way, Indie Film Nation. I want it my way, Indie Film Nation. Going all the way, Indie Film Nation. You know it's gotta be Indie Film Nation, Indie Film Nation.
Mike Anthony Smith, and we're chatting with Sean Byrne, the writer-director of a fantastic Australian horror film, The Loved Ones. Sean, welcome to Indie Film Nation, and your film, The Loved Ones. We'll get straight into it, but in the sense, what was the pitch when you're trying to get people involved? How did you sell it? Because it's such a blending of different genres. How did you convince people of what the story was?
Well, I basically sold it as a fusion of Evil Dead and Carrie. They're both really popular subgenres, so I said I was going to bring the prom to the cabin in the woods and make the traditions of the prom, like the dress up and the dancing and the crowning of the king and queen. I was going to make that the instrument of torture, or the structure within the farmhouse. And because they're both really popular subgenres, then there's a good chance that if the film was good, that it would have a good commercial life.
And the actual writing process of it, was this a film that you had kicking around inside your soul for a long time, or was it something that you just sprung to you one day? And how long did it take you to actually write the script?
I'd written a couple of other feature screenplays that were perhaps a little too idiosyncratic, films that I still want to see made, but weren't ideal for a first-time film, first-time feature filmmaker. And horror's been a launching pad for so many, great directors, from Sam Raimi to Peter Jackson to Coppola. So I thought, well, horror, because in a way, the blood's the star. You can keep the costs down. It's a good way to kind of show off my style and really put a stamp on a genre. So it was kind of it was quite a practical consideration to begin with. I thought, right, if I'm going to spend all this time, I want to make sure that there's a good chance of selling it. Then once I had my concept, I started kind of working backwards, and I woke up one morning with an image of like a kid, or just a teenager, a kind of a Kurt Cobain type, who was in a bloody tuxedo, tied to a chair in the middle of a balloon-littered floor. And I thought, wow, that's a really cool image. And I thought, well, who is this kid? How did he get here? And how's he going to get out? And I sort of started working backwards from there. And because I think audiences are so genre literate, they basically know the formula. They've seen a million horror films, so I thought, well, I'm gonna try and use that as a positive, and try and find the freedom in that. So I thought, well, if people love genre and they know genre, then I'm going to bend it as much as I possibly can. And my motto was one foot in commercial territory, the other foot kind of dangling over a cliff, because no one wants to go on the same roller coaster twice. So I was trying to put loops in different places.
And how did you know through the writing process, because that's one of the strengths of the film, is the audience doesn't know what's going to happen next in your film. How did you discover that? Was it through feedback with friends, or was it something that you naturally discovered through the writing process? And how long did it actually take?
I finished the first draft just before the original Saw came out, which is quite a while ago. But as for sort of subverting the form, that was something that I was, I was always trying to do from the moment that I put kind of pen to paper. And usually, horror is about the last girl standing. So in this case, I wanted to do the last boy standing, and I wanted to give it a really, shiny, candy, glam look, because most horror films look as bleak as the subject matter. And I was just trying to find as many ways as possible to take a left instead of a right, just so the audiences would be surprised.
And the actual life of getting their film up. How was it difficult? Because were you working with a producer prior to, whilst you're writing the script, or did you just write it and then track down the team that worked on the film?
I'd written the script, and then Mark Lazarus, the producer, got in contact with the agency that I'm signed to, Cameron Creswell Agency, and he, it's one way that producers keep on top of what's out there, and he was really looking for a horror film, and anyway, so he's an experienced producer, which I needed as a first-time feature filmmaker to try and attract the attention of funding bodies. I'm less of a risk, so he got hold of the script, and he said he was he had like a stomach ulcer, and he was waiting to see the doctor while he was reading it, and he said in sort of the the room before going in, he was just reading the end of the script, and he was going, "Oh, holy shit, no way, this is like, I can't believe this is happening," because it gets kind of quite demented and runs off the rails. And so he looked up, and suddenly all the other people that were like in the waiting room were just looking at him, and at that point he knew he kind of wanted to get involved with the film. And Mark's had a lot of experience as a script editor, and also a novel editor. His wife's a novelist, so that really helped going through the drafting process.
And with the actual look of the film, which is such a key element, you've touched on the glossiness and the shininess and the thing. Was that something after you'd written the screenplay that you storyboarded, or were you more guided by the locations for the actual creating the look of the film?
Every shot was storyboarded in advance, and then I sort of hooked up with a cinematographer, Simon Chapman, and he made suggestions to the boards and the script, which really elevated the material. And I'd made a short film with Simon before called Advantage, which was a supernatural horror, but it had the same kind of glossy look, and tonally it was quite similar. It was quite tongue-in-cheek, and pretty consistently pulled the rug out from beneath the audience's feet. So we had that kind of template. We knew we wanted to go for a kind of a Bruckheimer glossy look, because that would be a really interesting contrast with the violence. And the more candy and pretty it felt, we felt like the more that we could push the violence, and it'd still stay a really fun watch. So so that was a big part of getting the film off the ground. And once funding bodies and investors could see this other film and see that myself and some of my team knew their way around the genre, then it made it easier for them to give us the money, because that's the hardest thing, is everyone reads something differently, and the more materials you can present that creates a really concrete case, takes out the question marks, and the more likely you are to get be successful in terms of getting funding.
And when it comes to the casting process, because this film really can swim and die on the performance, and the three key cast members all delivered in incredible performances. Was that a long and arduous process, or did the people that come to the project, were they discovered early on, and how was that process actually seeing the characters being brought to life?
Oh, it's incredibly exciting. I mean, it wasn't a long process, because it's typical of the Australian film industry. There's not a huge amount of money, so you've got to move really quickly. I had no preconceptions going into the casting process, other than I'd written character briefs, and I was just waiting to see how they were going to be, how that brief was going to be interpreted by the actors and brought to life, and so it ended up being the actors that came in that interpreted the scenes well, and surprised me and kind of gave me goosebumps, ended up being the ones that got the job. But I was adamant from the beginning that we needed really top flight actors that knew their way around a film set and could hit their marks, because we had a saying all through production, which was, if you don't care, then you don't scare. And I think that's incredibly important for a horror film, that you have to care about the people that are in peril, because if you don't care about the victims, then there can't be any suspense. It's just violence for the sake of violence, and you're left with nothing but a stalking monster,
And with the actual shoot, how long was it, and what cameras were you using on this particular shoot?
It was a 27-day shoot. you know, which wasn't a lot of time for what we were doing, so we had to prepare as much as humanly possible. We shot on the red, which worked really well. We knew we wanted to have this kind of, you know, glossy Bruckheimer sheen, and the red was the closest to a 35mm look. Kept saying to the cinematographer, I wanted the audience to feel like they had the urge to jump out of their cinema seats and run up and kind of lick the screen, and that it would taste sweet. And yeah, the red really does have a nice glossy look to it, so that worked well.
And for the actual editing process of the film, did the film change much from the actual script through the editing process, and how long were you in post-production for?
I think we were in post-production for around about 9 weeks. I mean, the whole thing is it's sort of a total whirlwind when you're in the middle of it. It's just, you know, once the hourglass is turned over, it's this crazy race against the clock. The script didn't really change, or the structure didn't change that much. There was one subplot that we ended up removing because, you know, like so often happens, sometimes you need a subplot to communicate something on the page that actually communicates, you know, kind of effortlessly visually, but it's sort of hard to know until it's up there on the screen. So it was really just a matter of kind of extracting just one subplot, which made the film move a lot faster. But the biggest challenge for you know, myself and Andy Kenny, our editor, was just to make sure that each horror moment had its own distinctive shape and personality, so that it didn't feel one note, because a lot of horror can after a while feel quite one note. It's like, you know, if someone's in danger, they're being chased, they're running, they're being chased, and so we wanted to mix it up with a dark, delicious sense of humor, and use the whole toolkit from kind of, you know, quietly demented psychological horror to you know, getting right up and screaming in the audience's face.
And the film's been sort of playing the film festival circuit around the world, and the actual the experience that you've had being like on the road with the film and the international audiences, how has that experience been, and the different things, the way the audience reacts to, has that been an eye-opening that different audiences react differently, or has it been a fairly universal reaction to it?
It's been a fairly universal reaction. I mean, the good thing about the film is it is really modelled on an American style of filmmaking. I mean, America basically invented the cabin in the woods subgenre, and they invented the prom subgenre. So you know, that augurs well for its international life. But it does have its own you know, unique Australian irreverence, and, you know, we're not afraid to take the piss out of each other, and so that's a big part of the film. I always say that it's like having one foot in commercial territory and the other foot dangling over a cliff, and the commercial territory is the American model, and the foot dangling over the cliff is the is the Australianness, and it's hopefully got that kind of, you know, wild streak that harks back to, you know, Mad Max.
You've been trialling and trying to get your first feature up for a long time, probably 10 years, I believe, and has that been a difficult process for you? Has it been very frustrating, and how have you sustained your creativity? I mean, obviously your short films, but this journey to feature films, how have you managed to guide yourself through?
Yeah, I mean, I sustained myself by directing television commercials. So that was the you know, financial part of sustaining myself. The other part is just having a really, you know, good support network and family and friends, and my wife, who didn't really want me to quit on it. And I've got this theory that there's so many talented filmmakers around the world and in Australia, and it is really, really hard to get funding, and you know, it's what's in vogue is quite cyclical. So I always think of it as this filmmaker tree, and instead of, like, you know, leaves, there's all these filmmakers hanging on, and every now and again a storm's going to come and shake it and all these leaves fall off, but you've just got to hang on there, you know, hang on the tree for as long as possible until they kind of can't miss you. And I was really waiting for, you know, horror to come back in vogue, and I think thanks to Wolf Creek, you know, that made it a lot easier. It showed that really well crafted Australian horror can have a successful international life.
Yeah. And look, with now, because this is you made the film some time ago, and what's on the horizon? Is there any other projects that you're currently actively looking like getting up in the near future?
Well, The Loved Ones has opened a lot of doors for me. I've got really good representation in the States now, so I keep getting sent a lot of material. There's a project that I'm attached to in the States, and there's a project that I'm attached to in Australia, and I think it's just about spreading the net as wide as possible, because I can't take another 10 years to get a film off the ground, otherwise I'll be divorced. But I'm also writing my own film, which I'm about 3/4 of the way through, which is a bent take on the home invasion genre.
Yeah. And look, if people want to know more about The Loved Ones and yourself, where can people go and find out more?
We'll visit our website, which is www.thelovedones.com, and visit our Facebook page. There's a lot of fun stuff on there. But the best way to know about The Loved Ones is to just turn up and watch it, and come and support Australian genre. Even if you don't usually come out and watch Australian films, then don't think of this as an Australian film. Just think of this as the newest horror that's getting better reviews than the American horror films that are coming out.
Well, you couldn't.
Shameless plug.
I couldn't disagree more with that, because it's a brilliant film, and I hope everyone gets out to check out The Loved Ones when it hits cinemas and down the track on DVD and purchase the editions. But thank you very much for your time, Sean. Good luck.
All right, thanks a lot. Cheers.
Bye.